Continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present Marcia Huntley Maloney. Marcia has been an avid genealogical researcher for 20 years. Born in Vermont, raised in New Hampshire, and married in Massachusetts, she now lives in Orange County, California. As governor of the California Mayflower Society, she spearheaded a float project in the 2020 Rose Parade, commemorating 400 years since the Mayflower arrived on Cape Cod. The float won the American Award. You can see the float at www.camayflower.org. Marcia is a member of the New England Historical Genealogical Society, the DAR, Daughters of Union Veterans, the Mayflower Society, and Daughters of the Founders and Patriots of America, as well as many other historical and family associations. She is currently studying DNA after testing on both family tree and ancestry. She is a former certified property manager and a graduate of the University of Redlands. Her first approved Mayflower line was a child Mayflower passenger named Richard Moore. Richard was one of 4 children who traveled to the New World with 2 sisters and a brother. He was the only one of his siblings to survive that first hard winter in Plymouth. As such, his descendants are not as numerous as other pilgrims. Her program today will focus on the 4 more children and the other children of the Mayflower. The story is a tragic one, but also one of importance to our country, as it was the children who survived and eventually prospered while many of the adults died the first winter. So I'd like to offer a warm virtual welcome to Marcia.
Hi, nice to see you all. Many of you know that the ship Mayflower arrived in Cape Cod, Massachusetts 400 years ago in November 1620. The Mayflower left England later than planned because its companion ship, the Speedwell, kept springing leaks, and they had to return to port at least twice before finally getting away alone. It was already September. Many of the passengers had spent the 20 previous years living in Leiden in Holland, where they went to escape religious persecution from the Church of England and the King of England. However, after a period of time, they realized they were doomed to take menial jobs, and the children were beginning to adapt to the Dutch culture. They wanted to continue to be English. The Speedwell caused several major problems. One, they were too late getting going to plant crops before winter set in. And 2, many of the families had to split up and some stay in England. During our session today, it is appropriate to remember that it is now October, and at this time, 400 years ago, Mayflower was on the high, rough North Atlantic seas. Cold, seasick, and smelly, 102 passengers were crowded above that ship, and only 52 survived through that first cold, starving winter in Plymouth. Here is part of their story. I wrote this story several years ago in a family history writing class to commemorate one of my ancestors, child Mayflower passenger Richard Moore. "Richard, I'm scared and I don't feel good," 8-year-old Ellen said to her little brother. "I didn't kiss Mother goodbye. Are you sure this is really a great adventure, as Father said it would be?" The 4 children had just been tragically ripped out of bed in the middle of the night. Their carriage raced toward London to join a group of honest and religious citizens of good reputation who were embarking on a long journey within a few days. The children's father was sending them away with money to secure their future in a new land. The Moore children did not know that they were leaving the sheep-dotted hills and dales of their homeland forever. The night was cold and rainy, even though the soft, late spring days had been warm and sunny during this month of June. Soon the crickets would start chirping and the summer fun and games would begin here in the green Cotswolds hills. The older children hoped they would return from their adventure before the end of summer. Their baby sister, Mary, who was only 4, cried more loudly as the carriage rocked and leaned into each curve. They continued their fast journey into the dark night. When their mother, Catherine, awoke the next morning, she became aware that Ellen, Jasper, Richard, and Mary were gone. She never saw them again. Thus began the true story of 4 children torn from their ancestral estate called Lardon Hall in Shropshire, England, to travel with a group of strangers to a new world on the ship Mayflower. Once on the ship with the other children, they began to feel a little bit more cheerful despite their initial fright at leaving the familiar sights and sounds of home. The kind people with whom they traveled did their best, despite their own seasickness, to help the little children feel safe and comfortable. The other children on board diverted their attention with their high energy and endless games. 2 months later, in November 1620, the weary and tired passengers sighted land. Many of the passengers became sick, and half of them died that first cold, hungry winter on Cape Cod and in Plymouth. Ellen, Jasper, and Mary Moore did not survive. Miraculously, Richard did. In 1959, the true story of the Moore children was discovered by a descendant of Richard Moore in England. A bitter divorce had been fought in the courts between the children's mother, heiress Catherine Moore, and her husband Samuel. Samuel, who I think was her third cousin, was to whom she had been forced to wed, presumably to keep the lands in the family with the male heir. And I think he was like only 16 and she was already 20. At some point, Samuel decided his 4 children did not look like him, and he decided to divorce their mother and send the children away, of course, without telling her. So the 4 young Moore children were among the few that came without parents. Little Jasper, Mary, and Eleanor died that first winter. The Mayflower leaders had been paid by the father of the children to take them away from England and the possible disgrace of their parentage. Luckily for me, young Richard was placed in the Brewster household and survived, or I would not be here because I am his 9th great-granddaughter. For over 300 years, it was surmised that the 4 Moore children were poor little waifs from the streets of London. That didn't really make sense because they had been selected to come on the Mayflower when other children were left behind. Why? Why would they choose poor little waifs when space was limited? The answer is because they needed money for this new endeavor. And Samuel Moore paid dearly for their passage to the New World, where they would have land granted to each of them after a certain period of time. There were 35 children and young adults on the Mayflower. This was of great importance to the survival of Plymouth Colony on the New World. Many of the children had become accustomed to hard labor because they needed to work in Leiden to help support their families. As with many immigrant families in the 17th century Holland, the Pilgrim Fathers were generally hired for the lowest paying occupation. And several of them are very highly educated, so they could have obtained better positions had they not been immigrants to Holland. When the struggling group of colonists faced the cruelties of the New England winter, it was the children who many times stepped in to assist the adults. Undoubtedly, brave young souls were kept busy tending the sick, fetching firewood and water, helping to prepare food, and doing whatever was necessary. There were fewer deaths among the children that first cruel winter, which ultimately increased the chances of survival for the struggling colony. I think these facts are absolutely fascinating. Only 4 women out of 18 were left, and only 22 of the 49 men. 26 of the 35 children, or 75%, survived. It is easy to see that the children and teens had to help prepare the first Thanksgiving meal that following year, with only 4 ladies remaining. The children who had mothers traveling with them had a much better survival rate. Those that died besides the 3 more children were William Button, John Hook, Solomon Power, young Master Tinker, and the 2 Turner boys. All except Master Tinker were not accompanied by their mothers. Such a sad, sad story. Almost makes me want to cry right now. Most of the children who survived had many children themselves. Some had 10 and 12 children. And they have created what is estimated to be about 35 million descendants alive today. Our ancestors braved a perilous journey and had a tough start, but we are exceedingly grateful that they eventually flourished and established Western civilization. This is only one of the many fascinating stories about our programs. Study is ongoing. Now, I thought it might be fun. How many of you, might I ask, have Mayflower ancestors? We know Suzanne does, Billy does. Anyone else?
Wendy does.
Wendy, okay. So I will start. For instance, I would like to talk about, just tell you what happened to Richard. And then I'd like to know what happened to the rest of I have a list of what happened to all the other children, but some of you might like to talk to that yourself. So my Richard continued to live in Plymouth, and he married Susanna Hunter, and then he moved up to Salem. So he was still alive, one of the few Mayflower ancestors who was still alive during the Salem witch trials, which I think was interesting. He was a sea captain, which is why he lived in Salem. I know he did a lot of work with Isaac Allerton, another leader of the Mayflower group. He only had 4 kids, and 3 of them, 2 boys, there was no further record, so we assume they died young. The other was married but never had children. However, his daughter, Susanna, did have children. And Susanna is the pilgrim, or the person from whom I'm descended. And as a result, Richard Moore's descendants are few, whereas John and Priscilla Alden had 10 children, so their descendants are many. There is an Alden family society and an Alden house in Duxbury, Mass, in case any of you are Alden descendants. So with that said, Suzanne, would you like to talk about your Mayflower ancestors?
Sure. Mine was Thomas Rogers. He was born in about circa 1571 and died the first winter in 1621. He was a Leiden separatist. His eldest son, Joseph, was a passenger on the Mayflower. And of course, I'm descended, from him. And it was a sad story. He made the hard journey over and never lived to see the success of what it turned into.
Exactly. That's what's so sad. Don't we wish? So often I hear people say, I wish my grandmother was here to talk to her about these things.
Also, if anyone else has a Thomas Rogers Mayflower, if they're a descendant, there is a Thomas Rogers Society that you can join. It's once you get into the Mayflower Society, you can use the same documentation that the Mayflower Society accepts to get you into the Thomas Rogers Society. I just literally filled out the new form and sent all the same documentation.
Good, thank you for that information. So who's your other, you said you had more than one, more than Thomas Rogers. Do you have another?
No, not me. I'm still working. I have leads on several more, but I haven't proven them yet.
Okay. Billy.
Got through going through my book of the Sayre family, the lineage of Thomas Sayre, founder of Southampton, which is in my lineage. And in this book, I found that there is a lineage to, it's the 7th generation of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins of the Mayflower, but I have not really researched it any further. But like I said, I just got through reading this book. So
Good.
so I will be looking at them.
Yes. Any help you need, Suzanne and I are here.
Okay.
And John and Priscilla Alden had 10 children. So they're, as I say, their descendants are many.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you might want to log on to the Alden family website. And,
Okay.
you know, I was honored a year or so ago when I was in Plymouth to be hosted on a trip where we went to the Alden house diggings, and they found the actual foundation
Wow.
of where John and Priscilla's house was there in Duxbury. So that was very fascinating. I'm not an Alden descendant that I know. I'm still looking, but because that's the other interesting thing about these children and who they left. We actually have many of us who have joined the society, like me, find out later that we have several Mayflower ancestors. Sometimes because the kids, you know, married people within the same community, but others just have one that they've ever been able to find. So I think it's fascinating the different techniques that people use to find their way. Now, another thing that's interesting I'd like to bring up that Suzanne alluded to is there were the saints and the strangers. I think about 50% of the passengers were religious, were leaving to escape religious persecution. But the others, like my Richard Moore and Richard Warren, were adventurers. Richard Warren was one of the people who left because they wanted an adventure, and they wanted to do well and have land. And so coming to America was the way they could do it. And it must have been a very exciting time for them once they got here and got settled in and got through that first hard winter. So let's see, who else? Was it Connie? Connie, did you say you had?
Yes, Francis Cook is my 11th great grandfather.
Oh, good. Would you like to
And
talk?
I think I have more too, but I'm trying to just finish him.
Okay. So would you like to talk a little bit about Francis Cook?
Uh,
That's okay. Just about his early life or what happened to him and how you descend.
I descend from, I guess I'm not ready to talk about it.
No, that's fine.
I spent more time just trying to get the 1900 birth certificates. That I can talk about.
Yeah, you're not the only one. Well,
Connie, have you already applied and been accepted, or are you just getting your paperwork together?
I'm still trying to get those birth certificates and marriage certificates from Indiana.
Gotcha.
So, no, I have the application, but I haven't put it in yet.
right. Well, there's plenty of help, as Suzanne said.
Well, the thing is they switched from the health department to something else, and then trying to get a hold of somebody, it's not been easy, so.
Right. Well, which of his children do you descend from?
Let's see.
He had Sarah, Elizabeth, Hester, Mary, and
Okay,
Mercy.
John.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Okay, it's Francis, John, Sarah, then the Hathaways, Sissons, Peckhams, and down the Myrick line, Myrick to Boyd.
Okay, good. Well, you happen to be a cousin of mine because John Cook married Sarah Warren in Plymouth on
Okay.
on March 28, 1634. They had the 5 children that we just talked about, and John died in Dartmouth, Mass on November 23rd, 1695 at the age of 88. So some of these people really did live good long lives after all they went through. It's amazing. But so there's a perfect example of what I mentioned before, that John Cook and Sarah Warren, there's your second line from John Warren of the Mayflower. And that's another interesting story. Anyone has a Richard Warren line, would they like to speak to that? Well, hearing none.
Why don't, Marcia, why don't you share the story? It actually, I know it's going to be interesting.
Okay, well, I lost my place here. The Warrens, Richard Warren came by himself. They've never been able to find out exactly where he was from. So they say he was a merchant from London. I think he was one of the adventurers that put money into the project. And they actually in recent years have discovered been able to prove the ancestry of his wife, whose name was Elizabeth Walker. And so, and that line goes back quite a ways. And I think that's what's fascinating about all these different Mayflower stories is research. They're still uncovering stories and things that happened. Now, Richard came by himself. So his wife stayed behind. They had 4 daughters and were living in England. And she came a couple of years later with the 4 daughters, and then they had 2 sons in Plymouth, and they both had descendants. But the 4 girls all married, I think all of them married into other Mayflower lines. So my Warren, I've found 2 lines back to Richard Warren. Now, again, proving them when you get to, I think it was Connie that said, he's still trying to find documents. But even though I stayed in New England a long time, there was still just a lack of records during that, what they say, between 1850 and 1750. I think people were just trying to survive, especially those, as I told Suzanne earlier, that moved into the wilds of upper New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, what's now Vermont, but was part of New York and Vermont at the time, in New Hampshire at the time. So they didn't keep good records. And it was quite late in Vermont, actually, before they started these records. If any of you are looking at Vermont ancestry, please be sure to contact me, because I've spent a lot of time nosing around up in that state. I know the geography, and I'm trying right now to prove a line to Isaac Allerton and Diggory Priest. But again, it's because of lack of records in Vermont. So I have a lot of clues. If you'd like any assistance, feel free to contact me. Well, no, go ahead.
So I'm related to William Bradford, Governor Bradford, is what
okay.
I'm about. And that's, the stories that my grandma had always told me on my paternal father or grandfather's side. And, but I'm still not, I'm still trying to finalize everything and look at stuff. But he married his first wife, and his wife died on the ship, right, in the first year.
Right, Dorothy Bradford.
Right. And then is there an Alice Carpenter Southworth somewhere?
Yes.
So that's how I'm related. That's how I'm related.
Oh, good. Well,
So,
another example of you and I being connected, I didn't, when I first joined the Mayflower Society, it was like, everybody said cousin, cousin, cousin. And I'm like, I only knew at that time I had Richard Warren. So I, thought, what are they talking about, cousins? Until I got more into this. But the Carpenter story is very interesting too. They were all part of the religious group that went to Holland. And there were 4 Carpenter sisters. So Alice Carpenter had a sister, forgotten what her name is, but she was my ancestor. So there was a wonderful article written in one of the New England historical genealogical magazines a few years ago that talked about the 4 Carpenter sisters. And
Okay.
they stood up at each other's weddings. And then when they came over here, of course, they were very friendly and continued to be a wonderful family community and a family group. But here's another funny story. When I went to Plymouth the first time and went on board the Mayflower 2 in the harbor there, I asked the guard who, if he thought Dorothy Bradford committed suicide, the first wife. Did she jump off the ship? Did she fall off the ship? Now, I quite frankly think that she had postpartum blues because, she left a very young baby boy at home in Holland. I mean, how did a woman deal with that? And I think she was only like 20 herself. So I think there's a good chance her husband at the time she fell off or slipped off or jumped off, he was on Cape Cod exploring, looking for where they might settle. So she was missing him. It just, I would have jumped off, I think. But anyway, the funny part of the story is, of course, they didn't believe in suicide. So the Mayflower guard that was showing us around said, oh, Madam, how could you even think such a thing? So I've always gotten a kick out of that.
Well, and, the other thing, and I know there was only so many people that came over on the Mayflower, what, there was 105, right? Or something.
102.
Right. And I'm also related to Reverend Robinson. But
okay. Oh, wow, that's exciting.
Did he not come over on the Mayflower?
No, he did not. He stayed in Leiden because somebody had to stay and look after the folks there.
Right.
So, and he thought he'd eventually get here, but tragically did die. I mean, it was a few years later, but he never came.
But his family must have come because that's how I have, that's how I'm related, part of my family too.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So
they all intermarried.
Yeah. So to be a descendant of the Mayflower, then you had to have somebody that was physically on the ship when it came across, of those 102 people, plus those merchants and the sailors and things like that, right?
Exactly. And you have to have direct lineage, and you have to be able to prove and connect each generation to the prior generation.
Right.
So you start with yourself and start working backwards.
So then so can I then use records that I find for somebody else along the way that they've proved it all the way back? Now I can prove it to them.
Oh, yes, absolutely. If you're related to somebody who has proven a line and it's in your same line, all you have to do is contact Plymouth or start with your, and Suzanne will know who it is, who your historian is right there do you live in Nevada?
Yes.
Yeah. She'll help you, direct you in the right place toward the right person. But that person can do a search in Plymouth.
Okay.
And find if you might be related to a certain person or descended from a certain person. And that would save you lots and lots of time, but you would still have to prove to that your relationship to that person.
Right, to get to that person. So
right.
The other story that, again, my grandma was born in 1903, and the stories that she would share was that somehow, and this is the part that I can't figure out in the history, is so that so William Bradford was the second governor of the colonies, right, or of that group. And
Right.
but somehow on my so it's again from my paternal grandfather, that their family actually ended up in Canada. So they kept saying that they were loyalists. She kept using the word loyalist, that they went to Canada.
Right.
Not sure, but actually my grandfather's father is actually Canadian. So somehow we got up north. Did we run away? Were we for the king, or were we against the king? Or
Well, depending on when they went, I would surmise that they might have gone up during the Revolutionary War because they were loyalists and didn't want to fight for the cause. So that's exactly where they went. Many of them, they had shiploads when Washington chased them out of New York or Manhattan. A lot of them went up and established lands up in Canada, particularly, in those eastern townships. But Nova Scotia, do you know where your
Quebec.
ancestors?
They're in Farmingham in Quebec area.
Yeah, that's, I would say that's a good place to start looking. But
Right.
many of them came back too later after the war was over.
Yeah.
However, that sounds like a really fun ancestry to have. And do you know about the Bradford Manuscript?
I don't know about that.
Okay. Well, Governor Bradford, which is why we know so much about the Pilgrims to be true, kept a manuscript and started it actually in later years. So some of it was from memory, but he's the one who was able to tell us who all was on the ship besides the signers of the Mayflower Compact. And it's a very, very interesting story because for years that manuscript was lost. People knew it had existed at one time, but somehow, I think it was during the Revolution or at some point, it got taken to England and was lost in a library and then discovered there many years later. So I told Suzanne, the person who's probably going to be the next Mayflower State Governor, Scott Miller, down here in Orange County, does a wonderful program on the discovery of the Bradford Manuscript. So
Okay.
I'm thinking that might be a good person for you all to listen to at some point.
Well, I know Suzanne sent us something about discovery and it was probably a month ago. And so there was something in there about the manuscript, now that you say that.
Yeah.
Interesting. How do you get a copy of that? How do you get a copy of the Mayflower Compact? How, is that even possible?
Well, I'm going to give you the website right before we close, which is the California website. That'll lead you to the Plymouth website, which is the General Society. And they have lots of good books. You can actually go online and Google of Plymouth Plantation. And that is part of the writings of Bradford and some of the other people in Plymouth. But you'll also be able to get a copy of the compact that way.
Thank you. I really appreciate all your help.
Very welcome. And I hope, like Suzanne says, she's willing to help too. She's gone through it herself. So
she's just been phenomenal. This lady has so much energy. I just don't know how she does it. It's just amazing what she does for us in the program she pulls together. So
yeah, I'm pretty fascinated, and I'm just learning about her through Jonathan.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you for letting me share.
Wendy, you can also contact, besides our library does have quite a few good books on the Mayflower as far as genealogy is concerned. And we do have, of course, the Great Migration series too. It's a series of I think about 12 volumes. That does not leave the library. That's an in-library use only set. But I think pretty much if you're just looking for the first, are you looking generation 1 through 6, 1 through 7? Whereabouts are you stuck at?
Well, I'm not really stuck. I've done really well and I've got all the way, but again, it's on Ancestry and and I know like from the stories that I'm supposed to be related, and I'm also supposed to be related to Sir Francis Drake somewhere down the line too. But I just now need to see what I've put together in my line, and I don't know. I just have to put it all together a little bit more, I guess, and so I can actually prove it. So for that and the Revolutionary War and, you know, Daughters of the American Revolution, and there's a lot of them.
It
Wonderful.
just takes time.
Where to start?
Time is what we need more of, right?
Yeah, and I'm not retired either.
Also, there is help available, not just through our library, but also through the local colony here in Reno. You could reach out to David Hess, and I'd be more than happy to give you his email address. And there's other people within the local colony that will be more than happy to help you as well. So, you know, don't feel alone. You know, they really want you to get in, and they really want you to, you know, get your research done. And if you need help with that, there's many people who are willing to help.
Yes, well, and my husband heard something on one of the travel shows in England that I guess there's a pub where you can sign a book if you can prove that you're a descendant of the Mayflower. So he's all excited about wanting me to be able to sign this book on our trip. And, you know, and the funny part about you're talking about all these adventures that came to the United States. Well, when I went and married a British man, and so that's why we're pretty excited about this too. So, you know, done the migration back to England, and, you know, kind of been very adventurous. So now I can see where it comes from, the blood root.
Yeah. And 2020 is such an exciting time to do it. Unfortunately, we've missed all those wonderful commemorative events back in Plymouth because they all had to be canceled. But now with 2021 coming up, that will be a celebration of the first Thanksgiving. And there are a lot of Native Americans that'll be joining in, and it'll just be wonderful. So good luck to you, and keep me posted.
I will.
Wendy, I want to add one thing. You mentioned DAR, and this is not just for you, but for the entire class. If you need help with DAR applications, once again, just like with the Mayflower Society, there's plenty of help available, not just in our library or through the local LDS libraries like here in Carson City or in Reno, but also if you go to the DAR main website, the headquarters office online, you can put in an inquiry. They have like an online form, and they will automatically route it to the DAR chapter closest to you. And the registrar from that chapter can reach out to you and work with you directly as well. So there's all kinds of places you can get free help. I just wanted the whole class to know that.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm discovering now, well, in the last year, on Facebook. I don't know how many of you are on Facebook, but we used to use, when I started 20 years ago, we had those lists from, I've forgotten which website, but people would answer questions and help you with your research in different states. Well, now those, now that Facebook is so wonderful, they have a Connecticut Facebook page. They have a Facebook page for the General Society of Mayflower Descendants, and people go in and talk about it all the time. And it's just fascinating. And it takes you 2 seconds sometimes to get an answer, where it used to take, and before my time, before the computer, it was, I don't know how they did that and put these families together, but we are sure grateful to them. So how about John Helens? Anybody descend from John Helens?
Yes.
Karen? You
Karen,
do?
yes.
Would you like to tell his fun story?
Sure. He came over, he was a servant to, I think it was John Carver. And in a storm, a violent storm, he fell off the Mayflower, and he saw a boat, or not a boat, a rope that was trailing from the boat, and he reached up and grabbed it, and he was saved. And he fell in love with Elizabeth Tilley, who was only 17 at the time. They married, and I'm a descendant from Hannah, their first child.
And I think they had 12 children, 12 or 13 children, didn't they?
I think they only had 10 or 10.
Oh,
that's-
okay, yeah. Well, they and the Aldens were, I think they've got more descendants than anyone.
Mhm.
So and then Stephen Hopkins is interesting because has anybody got Stephen Hopkins?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I
Claudia.
also have William Bradford.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, thanks for telling us. You and Wendy will have to get together. Would you like to tell us about Stephen Hopkins?
I don't know that much about Stephen Hopkins. I know more about William Bradford.
Okay. Well, Stephen Hopkins was in Jamestown first before he came to Plymouth. And he was shipwrecked there. I think he was just an explorer. I'm not sure they know why. But if you have Stephen Hopkins, you also can join the Jamestown Society. So people love to have both those connections.
Okay.
The Jamestown Society is very active. And he was shipwrecked, as I mentioned, in around Bermuda somewhere. And actually Shakespeare's The Tempest is believed to be based on the Stephen Hopkins story. So see, there's interesting stories about all of them. Another thing that's fascinating is halfway across, and during one of the violent storms, the giant midship beam split. And that was sure death to all of them. However, the Pilgrims, whom the crew had made fun of, actually, because they were religious and funny and all that, funnily dressed, and prayed all the time, and they just gave them a bad time. But the crew certainly respected them after a while, because they apparently they had brought a piece of equipment with them from Holland. And they don't know if it was a printing press or some or other sort of equipment, but it was big enough that they were able to hoist this equipment up against the beams, and the ship was saved. They sailed the rest of the way to the New World. And it just gives you goosebumps, because we were meant to come, or they were meant to come and start this wonderful new country. So why is the Mayflower still important to us today? Well, in Cape Cod Harbor, over 18 people signed the Mayflower Compact, which is the first in America establishing self-governance in the New World. Many parts of our US Constitution are based on this amazing document. So I think that's pretty incredible. The other thing is there's lots of wonderful stories about, the Native Americans in the Pilgrims were not fighting. There was great cohesiveness between them for probably 50 years before King Philip's War, which is another subject. But when people say, for instance, we were in the Rose Parade this year with our float, commemorating 400 years. And I saw a couple signs in the audience, which is not bad when there were 1 million people along the boulevard. But anyway, a couple of signs said, "Your ancestors killed our ancestors." And it's really upsetting that people don't know the real truth, in that they actually saved each other. The Native Americans needed our protection with our guns from the other Native American tribes with whom they fought. And the Native Americans saved us because they taught us how to plant corn and fish and do other things that our Pilgrims just weren't familiar with. So the Native Americans really did save us, but we also helped save them. So it was a two-way street, and they were very, very friendly with each other. There are books and stories about that too out there. So you just have to look around and you'll find lots of good information. The other thing is is DNA. And right now, Plymouth has a whole staff that studies DNA. And they've discovered some of the Y lines that go back to Bradford and Brewster. And we're hoping they're going to start making some progress. We're all encouraged, those of us who are descendants, proven descendants, to submit our DNA results to that DNA, Mayflower DNA group, because it's going to eventually help other people connect. Of course, it's still a relatively new science, but every day they're finding new things about it to tell more stories. We talked about the saints and the strangers. The other thing I want to impart to you is the fur trade. Of course, they starved and had no way of making money, and they were supposed to pay those adventurers back. So, but after several years, they got involved in the fur trade, particularly up in Maine and New Hampshire and lower Canada. And people in Europe were really in need of fur to keep them warm and for many other reasons. So the fur trade helped the Pilgrims pay off their debt several years later. So you can deem the settlement was a success. People also say, why? Jamestown was started first, but Jamestown didn't succeed like Plymouth Colony did. And I always like to say, and Plymouth has a better marketing program with our Plymouth Rock and things like that. So the I alluded to the Rose Parade. I don't know if any of you saw the parade this year or had heard about it. I'm sure your descendants heard about it because we were always looking for money. But that ended up being the only commemorative event that happened in 2020 because of COVID-19. But we were so incredibly proud of that ship. We made all the money ourselves, we decorated it ourselves, and then, as Suzanne said, we won the Americana Award. So I just wanted you to all know that, because you'll be able to see on, I'm going to show you our website.
Marcia, could you tell everybody, if you don't mind, how much did it cost to make that float? And also, how long did it take you to raise the money?
A couple of years, and it cost $300,000 for the float itself. But there were other things that we did that we didn't realize were going to cost money. You know, $5,500 that we got the General Society pay to enter the parade. And it was an absolutely fascinating experience. It took us 2 years, as I say, to collect money. One of the nicest things that happened is right before Christmas last year, when I was starting to panic about money and being able to pay off our society who had funded our California Society. A lady called Plymouth, and she'd read about it in our Mayflower magazine and said, I'd like to help these folks. I live in California. And so they put us in touch with her, and she said, all right, if you promise to get this in every newspaper in the United States, which we said we'd try, but I'll give you $25,000. I'm like,
Wow.
oh my God, that put us over the top. So I'll forever be thankful. But unfortunately, she wanted to be anonymous, so we couldn't celebrate her. But I'll be forever grateful. She was a Mayflower descendant. She was actually a member of the society. So things like that were just so heartwarming. And then again, riding on the float, that whole thing, picking the people who could ride, they had to have the proper pilgrim outfit. Well, you can't see all of mine, but the material had to be authentic. we really wanted to educate people. My outfit is wool. Linens were also used. This is all linen, but there were no polyesters back then. So, but I think that's it, Suzanne, other than the website. If any of you descendants are interested in t-shirts that list all the ancestors, we have some on sale on our California website. And also there are pictures of some of our interviews and us decorating the float. So if you'd like to look at that, that would be fun.
Marcia, would you like to share your desktop? Do you have it? Do you have the website up on your desktop? You can share your screen.
I thought I did. Hold on just a sec.
Maybe I can bring it up and I can share it on mine. So just the California Mayflower Society?
camayflower.org.
Okay, so where would you like me to go on it? Just direct me, Marcia, and I'll be happy to pull it up.
Well, I think if you just, most of that, if you just go down the page a little bit, you can see there's a rendering of the float and then the real float. See that?
Right there, that's the rendering.
Yep. And so if you go in there, those are the sale items right there.
Let me scroll
So,
down a little bit more here.
yeah, it's fun. Oh, and that was the other thing. The title of our, every float has to have a working title and a name. So this year's parade theme was something about hope. And so we called ours The Voyage of Hope 1620. And it just fit into the parade theme so well. It was really great. But I got carried away a little bit, Suzanne, away from the children. So, but that's about all I have, unless anybody has a question about any specific child. I think I'm ready to sign off.
Did you want to, where on the website can they look at the t-shirts?
I thought that you had pulled that up. Okay, go down further. So it'll say at the top of the website, it'll say float.
Float, okay, hold on.
See the menu up there?
2020.
Yeah, it'll say either Voyage of Hope or let me go on.
Voyage of Hope.
Yeah, I
Right
don't
there.
know.
There's a trailer. I see the trailer.
Right, and then okay. See there 2020 commemoration
2020 commemoration. Hold on.
at the top.
Right there. Okay, I see it.
What you can find in there is sale items. You find information about the float itself, costume guidelines, which is fabulous. We had professional members who are professional designers in Hollywood who worked on the clothing.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Now, obviously there might be some people who are interested. I know with DAR, a lot of the DAR women have period costumes.
Right.
Is there a place where you can buy patterns or, oh, I see right there, historical clothing patterns?
Yep.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Tells you all about it, what's accepted and what's not. Talks about shoes. I have a little purse that was made out of fur. And again, on that front page, it says, check out our marketplace. It's open now. All memorabilia's on summer special.
Hold on. Let's see here. Would that be under activities? Let's see here. Hold on. History, membership. No, I don't see it.
No, it's on that very front page that we were looking at.
The one on 2020.
Yeah.
Gem donor, where should I click? Gem donor about the Rose Parade float.
Just below there, it says, check out our marketplace.
Check out our marketplace. Hold on, why don't I see that?
Now open. It's right under the gem level.
Underneath gem level donor is Plymouth and Congress 2020 about the Rose Parade float, ways to donate, costume and
Suzanne,
float
It's
progress.
down, Suzanne, it's down in the, see where the colored gems are?
Oh, right down here? Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Oh,
on the
okay, thank you.
Right-hand side.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
there? Do I click
Yeah.
on one of these?
Yeah. That should take you to the pin.
Huh.
Well, I know you'll find it if
Yeah.
you
Okay.
look around it. So let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to do. And
There's
then
the
you'll,
picture of the float.
yeah. And you'll be able to, let's see, let me go back to my,
Beautiful float.
it really was. We were so proud of it. And you know, it looked so much like the Mayflower itself. The day they took it away, and of course, everything has to be covered in natural materials or flowers. And the day after post-parade viewing, and they took it back to Fiesta Parade Floats, who designed and made ours. You could see the back of the ship with the Mayflower on it. And I mean, it's like, no, don't take it apart. They had to, that stuff wasn't gonna live. But it was like, no, it was so sad because we'd worked so hard, you know, seeds and weeks of planning, and then putting those flowers on at the last minute. One other fun thing was that they had the flowers, we had roses, 102 roses that we wrote each Mayflower passenger's name on. So those passengers got to ride again 400 years later.
Wow.
I know. We're some pretty creative people. So I think I'm going to click on this Voyage of Hope thing. And then you don't have to watch it all. You can just quick turn me off whenever you want. But it's a good way to end the session. And thank you so much for having me.
Okay, Marcia, I'll go ahead and start. You want me to start the trailer?
Yeah, you can. And if some of you, maybe if you don't all think you're Mayflower descendants, you'd be surprised. Just keep looking.
Well, thank you, Marcia. This was a wonderful presentation, and we'll go ahead and end it with this, and then I'll let the class know. After the presentation is over, for the last hour of class, we do working on individual trees. So after the trailer is done running, I'll go ahead and say anybody who'd like to stay on, please do. And if everyone else doesn't want to stay on, just go ahead and log off. And I'll say thank you all for coming today. And Marcia, once again, thank you. It was a wonderful presentation.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure. Bye.
Bye-bye. I'll go ahead and start the video.
Okay.
you.